Hi, and welcome to Terf Talk Downunder. I'm Angie, and this is my very special guest, Juanita, who filled in at the very last minute. Welcome, Juanita.
Thank you very much for having me. My first time on, so I'm rather nervous.
Yes. Juanita's relatively new to Terfery, so she'll be a very interesting guest, and we can talk to her about how to attract more new people to our cause. So that'll be good. But first off, we're going to kick off with some of the local news. For starters, I've got a little list here. I just want to thank the women in the Terf Talk Downunder Facebook page as well for compiling some news stories for us, because it makes it much, much easier to keep track. Okay, first up, Giggle versus Giggle is back on again. Now, as you probably know, Roxy Tickle dropped his action against Sal Grover when she was heavily pregnant, that is suing her about her female-only app. He was taking her to the Human Rights Tribunal because he didn't get admitted to the app and because she considers trans-identified men to be men. And so, and he dropped that and has now decided, and he lodged a couple of days before Christmas, because he seems to like lodging things at times that could be personal, He seems to like using significant times to lodge legal applications. He's reapplied. He's reapplied to the High Court to hear the case. Now, that's going to be a very expensive legal process, and Sal it's going to be very expensive for both of them. So look out for the crowdfunder. But this is an opportunity, our first opportunity to legally test the definition of women within the Australian Constitution, because we remember that it got changed from, gender identity got added, and there was never a clarification between gender identity and sex and how that they will impact each other.
And yet, how can that be when biology is biology and that's the reality? And if you want to identify as something else, that's your right, but it doesn't mean you actually are, because biology should be the first thing. Like that's the truth. That's the real reality.
Well, gender identity is almost like it's a belief system. It's almost like a religious concept. So it never should have been put in there. It never should have been. But so this is actually quite huge, because it has the potential to be like a Mayor Forstater type case for Australia, and that's exactly what we need. And I can't think of a better advocate for women than Sal Grover as far as the media is concerned. She's very media friendly, she's very smart, she's very articulate, and she's she's able to build a team around her. So I'm kind of dreading it for her, because she's going to be completely nailed by the media and trolled by trans activists. But I also know she's very strong, and I'm quite excited about the prospect of this going ahead. And I also know that she'll be incredibly well supported by all of us.
Well, I've started, since I've woken up to what's happening, I've discovered her a little while ago, and then I've joined up on Twitter for the first time, and then joined, and then liking her tweets and reading her, and then listening to her on interviews as well, and seeing how articulate and well measured that she is, and agree with you 100% of how she presents herself as just perfection for standing up for a cause and the right cause.
Right. I'm just going to have to plug my laptop in. Another concern around the Giggle versus Tickle thing is that there was a case probably 5 years ago now where a radio announcer from Canberra had a legal action with a trans-identified male that was similar to this, and she actually got fined $10,000 for liking tweets that cast him in a negative light, right? So we're all kind of feeling a bit like we have to be very careful, because the things that we say online are going to be watched and potentially weaponized in this legal battle.
But
so put us all in an awkward thing.
Are we not allowed an opinion?
Well, it seems not. I've actually had a couple of bans thanks to Roxy Tickle. He delights in trolling through my tweets, looking for things that bots will potentially flag, because he's got nothing better to do. So, a vexatious, litigious person, which many of these trans-identified males are, is going to weaponise whatever they can. So, we have to be a little bit careful there, because we don't want to say anything that could jeopardise Sal's cause. So
no, and yet to me it sounds like I know we don't have it in the Constitution about freedom of speech like they do in America, and they don't in England either. But where does the line get drawn where you're not allowed to have an opinion about something, but you're not actually attacking someone? It's like, come on. Are they getting persecuted when they attack women online for standing up for their rights?
No, you can say anything you like about a woman. You can portray her in any way. You can, post pornographic pictures, and nobody does anything. But if you call a man a woman, you'll get a ban. You'll get blocked, and you'll get taken to a tribunal. Another on a down note, there's self-ID in Queensland. The submissions for that have closed. Many women and organisations have written to the Queensland government to oppose the passing of self-ID. If Queensland is anything like Victoria or New Zealand, all of the submissions will be ignored and the bill will be put to Parliament and gone through anyway. So, I hope that I know now that the women who've made submissions, they will be able to sleep at night, because they've made it very clear how damaging self-ID is.
Yep.
And it's on the politicians who voted in any damage that occurs because of it. So pretty awful that women have gone to all this trouble, and if they, that procedurally it is likely to be ignored. One good thing is that maybe some of the media around this, because a lot of women have woken up through learning about self-ID in Queensland, and maybe some media attention will help peak trans more people. That's really the only positive. Very sad. Yeah.
Well, I know when I speak to women about it, the things that they don't think of or have no understanding of what the reality is of the gender diversity versus reality of what it actually means. And I post stuff like that on my Facebook page of, hey, are you aware, blah blah blah, this is what this says, this is what it means. Are you okay with that? And I'm not asking to ask them to answer me, but just to merely think, here's a question and here's the answer to that question that people say is okay when it's actually not okay.
People have to put themselves in other people's shoes. Like, if you had a disabled child, for example, that needed intimate care, and you rang an agency to send out a nurse thinking, a female nurse, and a bloke turns up, what are you going to do? People can't seem to put themselves in those positions, because as a society, we tend to ignore the concerns of people who are disabled, or people who are in prison, or, people who have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault. Their concerns are ignored by the media and by us as a society. So it's easy when people think about self-ID to also ignore it.
Yes.
It's very frustrating.
I've said to a couple of women, are you aware there, for example, in Canada, there's only 2 domestic shelters that are female only left, because any man that wants to self-ID as a woman on any given day can go in there or demand to go in there, and one of them was actually vandalized, and they look at me in horror. I say, this is what the self-ID is all about. Any man on any given day can self-ID, and then I say to them, do you realize your husband can do that? I'm not saying that he would, but just to give them a physical example of dressed as he is, he can decide on that day, I'm identifying as a woman today, and walk into a change room and strip down stark naked in front of all the other women. And when women complain, they get kicked out.
Just ridiculous.
And they just
ridiculous.
have a look of horror on their face because they don't realise it. They just, and I didn't know, you know, myself, I had no idea either until it's like, oh my gosh, hell no. And
it's
no.
People. You know, people can't comprehend that it would be true because it's so crazy.
Yeah.
Good news. Kelly Jay's announced her dates for her speaker tour. The media have finally caught on and they're starting to talk about it, and Out in Perth, my favourite magazine, because they're the only ones who credit us, have posted about it and implied that she was transphobic and had links to, you know, extremist groups, things like that. So the propaganda machine has, you know, the wheels have started turning. So, you know,
reminder for Queen.
Oh, I'm in my daughter's room and she's got a Google Home thing in here and it's talking to me and freaking me out. This house. So Kelly Jay's coming out, and you know, we're planning, all the dates have been announced, so have a look in the Standing for Women website. And you know, there's some people who are critical of Kelly Jay who are like, oh, we don't want her here because of whatever, but you know, there's a hell of a lot of women that want her here, and I think regardless of whether you like her or not, whatever we're doing here in Australia isn't breaking through the media. It isn't bringing, you know, awareness people, and I will take almost any help that I can get, and I'm actually really looking forward to her coming, because you know, the controversy is going to make people pay attention, and this is what happens. You know, people see things like this channel, or they see my Twitter, or they see other things, and their first thing is, oh my goodness, you know, transphobic and awful, and then they actually read it and pay attention to it, and they realize it's common sense. And I think the same thing happens with Kelly Jay, you know, that you might not like the delivery, you might not like, you know, agree with everything that she says, but her core message is common sense, and she centers women. So
and brings us all together.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, and bringing us all together, and that's the message that I've heard from her as well with discovering her, and I listen to her on a regular basis, is I don't care what your politics are, I don't care what your views are on other subjects, on this one subject of our sex-based rights, we need to come together as women, and then once we've sorted that, we can go off into our own camps, not a problem, but we need to come together as a collective group, because half the world's population is losing. Half of the world's population is losing its sex-based rights. And
unbelievable.
You know, 127 years ago, we got the vote in Australia and New Zealand, and we were the first two countries to get the vote thanks to the suffragette women. And 127 years later, we no longer have toilets that are our own, because any man can walk in there. And yet we had a social contract. We all understood. No men came in. One time I've seen a man come into a women's toilets, and as soon as he walked through the door, all the women looked, you know, started panicking. And then he had two small children with him, and you literally saw all the women just relax, because he was obviously the one looking after the girls, and he took them to the toilet, and then he went out again. And that was okay, but any other guy comes in, it's, oi, out, you don't belong in here. And we all knew that. We knew that there was a social contract that was there for a reason, and now that reason magically doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So it's madness. It's utter madness that we're not allowed to have our own safe space. So just so a man can pretend he's a woman for the day.
Speaking of ridiculous, there was a big news article on SBS or one of those about a man who graduated as a medical doctor, and he accepted his doctorate wearing full drag, and all the articles were celebrating how brave he was and referring to him as she when he was dressed up, and saying how wonderful it was and how brave. Now, if I went to a GP and I found out that they were a raging misogynist who wore woman's face, I would not want to be near him. I think he's a danger to his female patients.
When did drag become acceptable to be? It's an adult entertainment, just like Moulin Rouge. It is an adult entertainment. It is men dressing up in a caricature, sexualized caricature of women. There's very few of them that are polished, that actually don't do it in a sexualized way, but the majority of it is. When did that become socially acceptable to put out there in mainstream and the schools and the children? It's sexual adult entertainment. It's not for, he shouldn't be seeing children. I wouldn't go to him as a doctor.
No
way. When did that line get blurred that nighttime R-rated entertainment was to be in GA ratings?
Right. In your local public library.
Yeah. And yet that's R18, you know, in the movie terms, or in, you know, I don't know how else to say it. It's just like, are you kidding me? That is so not okay.
They're blurring the lines between part-time and full-time trans activism as well, with people like, what's his name, from the ABC. Can't even remember his name. My viewers will know who he is, the blonde one. You know, so he's a gay man who dresses up as a woman, and he gets called she because he's got the outfit on. Now we've been reduced to, you know, just the most superficial thing, which is the appearance of being a woman. That's all you need to have that vague appearance of being a woman, to be used, you know, to have the pronouns of she, female, and woman. So you don't even have to have the female gender identity anymore. You just have to put the makeup on. It's getting more and more superficial and more offensive.
Yeah, look, if people want to do drag, I don't actually think there's anything wrong with that. It's not about that. It is an adult entertainment. It is R-rated, and it does not belong in schools and in front of children, and then teaching children that sexualized behavior and a caricature of women is okay to such small impressionable minds. And we're battling with the youth of today growing up on streaming porn, and it's actually going backwards with the boys of their treatment towards the girls and towards young women. My own niece was walking down the boardwalk in New Zealand with her boyfriend, who's a big Maori guy with loads of, like, he's full sleeve tattoos, and two young guys were hassling her in front of him. They had no qualms, and he just quickly went, "Are you guys all right, mate?" They went, "Oh yeah, okay." But they thought that they could harass her, and it was no problem to them until he piped up and said, "Hey guys, come on," and he calmed it down. But they were sexually harassing her, and to them,
one of my daughters is 14, and she's already getting dick pics.
Yeah,
and she's terrified of sex because of what she's seen in porn that people send her. Yeah. But no, and you know, and I don't think children, like, you know, I've been to Mardi Gras, I've been to Pride. I don't think there's a place for little kids there. No way.
No.
I think you should be at least 16. You know, 16 if not 18.
Yeah, that's adult.
Yeah.
And as adults, as adults, we can do what we like behind our closed doors. That's fine. You want to go and, you know, dress up, that's your call, but don't bring children into it and screw with their minds, and which is what's happening. And it's so glaringly obvious what's happening, the social contagion that's happening to them, that it's so scary, and they're just getting so messed up. I tried talking to a young woman the other day, and as soon as she started talking, she said, "Oh, but it's very complicated." And I said, look, it's actually not complicated. Our sex-based rights being stripped away. And once I started saying that, she just turned around and carried on working behind the bar where she was working because she didn't want to hear it. So she knew what I was saying was correct. Well, it's not complicated when we all need our own private space. And when I have these conversations with these young women or older women, I say, hey, we all need our spaces. They need their space. If you want to be gender diverse, then have your unisex space, but we still need men's space and women's space. We should not be losing our space for a man because he wants to pretend. That's not okay.
That is true. Takes me on to no good. Keep ranting. We love it. -18 advertising on Facebook to do the ACON like we'll go into your business or your public organisation and we'll teach you how to trans basically. -18 is Australia's version of Mermaids.
Mermaids.
It's
oh my God.
mental service aimed specifically at queer identifying kids. I use the queer inverted commas. So it's specifically targeting kids who identify as either, sex attracted or any of the acronym. And they target the ages from 8 to 25 or 12 to 25 in their social activity.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I've just mentioned 14-year-olds getting dick pics. I wouldn't want a 12-year-old with a 25-year-old in a event that's supervised by a couple of adults that you don't know.
I wouldn't even want 12 and 18-year-olds together, 12 and 16-year-olds together. 12-year-olds need to stay with 12-year-olds. They're different to 14-year-olds.
I've spoken to parents who, because the public mental health system in Victoria has collapsed, and particularly the youth mental health system, it is taken up with the worst of the worst cases like family violence, fire setting, suicidal. Like, we are overflowing. There's not enough services, there's not enough beds, and so parents in desperation turn to -18 as the most promoted and the government's funded mental health service for youth, and their kids get transitioned. The first thing they ask them is their pronouns and whether, and put them on the trans train. So they advertise.
Sorry.
Yeah. They're very wealthy because they have their Wear It Purple Day. They are sponsored by a whole bunch of different companies. The government gives them tons of money. Now, considering how poor all the other services, public health, mental health services, are faring, that they're all closing because they're not being funded. This particular kind of mental health service is extremely well supported, and there's a bit of investigating going on into who is actually funding this, although we know the government's supporting, who's encouraging it. So obviously lobbyists are using my pardon
and big pharma, because I know they are. Yes. That's the top head of it, because they've got lifetime patients by doing this. So they're creating a new revenue stream, which in my investigations and learning about this has been horrifying what they're doing and pushing. And WPATH is at the top of that, and their funding is coming from there. Like, it's clear where it's coming from. And the affirmation model. And so I spoke to a woman over Christmas about the affirmation model, and she had no idea what I was talking about. And so I explained it, and she's like, oh. And I said, that's why everyone's captured, because everyone's taking on this WPATH model, and yet Sweden's the first country that's pulled out just recently. They've pulled out of not using the affirmation model, and then Norway won't be far away, and I'd say France won't be far away. And you can already see in England they're starting to pull back as well, because the children who are young adults now are starting to sue. And so England is going to get, they've only got 2 cases so far of I think it's two biological women that are suing, and more will come. But there's over 1,000 families I've heard of that are going to be suing Tavistock. So and it's just going to keep growing.
Dan's doubling down. The only light at the end of the tunnel is that Michelle Telfer has stepped out for a little bit from the head of the gender clinic. Still no more news on that, by the way. We still don't know why or how or why she's stepped aside for a few months or been promoted for a few months. And we're hoping it's because they're reevaluating the affirmation model. But, you know, I think that's getting a bit hopeful.
They had it on 3AW before Christmas. I was listening, and when it comes to the mental health, to do with seeing psychiatrists, and a psychiatrist who was asked to recommended doubling how many hours were available for seeing patients, and they came back with halving it, and they halved what's already there. And they were just like, are you kidding me? We need more to be able to see more patients, not less patients. And what they do is they're saying, okay, you can have 10 patients now, not 20, but you get more time with those 10 patients. And this psychiatrist is saying, that's not what we need. We need to be able to see more children. And it was about the children. It was just mind-blowing what was going on. I'm like,
they do is they just funnel them into the gender clinic because they can't get an appointment with a private psychologist, and because also private psychologists and psychiatrists are reluctant to deal with them because of the conversion laws and the misunderstanding around those, thinking that they're going to be sued if they suggest to a child that maybe they're not trans, so they just get funneled straight into the gender clinic. It's just crazy.
And most of them aren't. Like, you think about it logically, that how many 10 years ago, how many gender clinics there were and how many psychiatrists that were qualified to treat individuals with this body dysmorphia condition, basically, which is what it really is. It's just a form of body dysmorphia. How many there were, and now all of a sudden within a couple of years it's just gone explosion. None of them are qualified to actually deal with the amount of children and the amount of adults that are coming out thinking that they are. They might be, they might not be, but they need qualified people to actually walk them through their learning journey of discovering who they are, and a qualified person. And none of these people are qualified because they haven't had the experience.
Did you know that Michelle Telfer herself, the head of the gender clinic, said at the AusPath conference last year that she had zero experience as a paediatrician in gender medicine before taking on that role?
So why was she given the role? Why? Yeah.
She said because nobody else wanted it.
I wonder why.
It's on the record.
Yeah. But it's the same in America. I mean, we all know America's like the Wild West, with how they're carving up people's bodies. But even here, there's not enough qualified people to administer mental health to the amount of children and adults that are claiming or believing, that they are in this situation. So, you know, and these poor parents are allowing their children to carve up their bodies. It's just, I actually spoke to a client the other day. I do house cleaning as a job, and she's actually a school teacher. And so I was actually yakking to her about the path I'm on and what I'm learning. And she was very polite. She listened to me. I didn't realize she wasn't believing everything I was saying because she was engaged, listening to what I said. I did a big, long talk to her. 1 week later, she came back to me and said, oh my God, Juanita, everything you said is so right. I've got someone that I know personally that is just put their 14-year-old child onto puberty blockers. And she was just like, it was like the light bulb went off. And because she's a teacher, she knows the language that she's not allowed to use at school anymore. And so she understood that part, but wasn't understanding the medicalization of children. And then it happened to her within a week. It was like, and I said, please talk to this, mother, and let her know that she's going to be unknowingly sterilizing her child, and just gave her as much information as I knew. And then spoke to her a couple of weeks later, and she said, yep, her mother's, seriously looking at it now. So, and I went, that's great. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, the Royal Children's Hospital website still has that puberty blockers are safe and reversible on their website. So,
how
and
can
that's
they
not
say
true.
that when they know it's not true and it's proven it's not true? How can they say that?
You can change sex. How can you say any of it? The whole thing is bullshit. So they can say whatever they like as far as.
What are their lawyers telling them? What are their lawyers telling them? Oh, yes, you can put this up even though it's not true.
I think that they are above the law. They are above the law. And Dan Andrews has, you know, he's protected them. They're going to say, oh, well, this was best practice. If you've ever tried to sue a medical practitioner, it's almost impossible in this country because of the cost involved. So even to get it off the ground, it cost you 20 grand. So these detransitioners, most of them who end off, you know, so devastated that they're on, like, you know, sickness benefits or whatever, once they realise what they've done, they're not in any position to fight back. So I think there would be so many more lawsuits if legal action wasn't so expensive and unattainable to average people. And they're kind of banking on that. When they're just funneling kids through this system, they're kind of banking on the fact that they will be, you know, unable to fight back. Like, they're probably even signing disclaimers. These families are probably even signing medical disclaimers like you do when you go in for an operation. Saying, oh, you know, side effects, blah, 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 I don't see the cost. And they're probably not even realising what they're signing away.
No, they wouldn't.
Oh, it's mad.
I mean, every detransitioner I've heard, when I've heard their story, has been they have not been presented with the facts. They've been presented with lies. And 90% of the side effects they have been told nothing about until it actually happens to them, and then they go, hang on a minute, I can't pee properly, I can't do this properly, I can't have an orgasm anymore, I've got no sexual function anymore, I've got, you know, a deep voice, I've got hair, you know, I'm going bald. They're not telling the girls, the young women, that when you go on testosterone, if you've got anyone bald in your family, guess what, you're going bald. And they're not telling them. And then by the time it starts happening, it's you can't reverse it. You've got to get off it really quickly before you actually do permanent damage. And I just say to people, start looking on YouTube for detransitioners. Listen to one story a week, and then come back to me in a month and tell me you still believe that this is safe and the way they're being treated.
Yeah, that's what piqued my woke friend. My friend was ultra woke, and what piqued her was she heard a detransitioner story.
Yeah.
And it just clicked in her head. She'd always said to me, oh, I don't want to talk to you about it. And then she came back to me and goes, oh, by the way, I'm a TERF. So, which was good.
Well,
sorry?
I was just going to say, Chloe Cole is the new young woman out there who's 18, and she stopped at 16. And so she's a very, very good person to listen to because she's articulate with the way she speaks. She's calm and measured, but tells her harrowing story. And I listened to her. The longest story I heard of hers was when she sat down with Jordan Peterson, and, you know, like him or not, doesn't matter. It's listening to her, and you listen to the full 2-hour story and you hear everything. And he really delves into it for her and treats her with dignity and respect. And it's just harrowing what she's been through and what the rest of her life's going to be. And she's lucky that she's got a good mind and a good inner strength that she's coming out of it and will have a life she can have to be, you know, to have a great life. But there's so much that she's lost forever that she'll never get back because doctors lied to her.
Yep. Terrible, terrible. There's been a couple of good things. The War Memorial, who controversially changed their wording from men and women who fought in the war to, what was it? People. Yeah. They've backflipped and they've returned it to men and women. And as we know, just imagine any conversation around the war. It talks about the soldiers, and in our heads, it assumes that soldiers are men. So when you change words from male and female pronouns to neutral ones, you're not erasing the men, because people by default think of the men when they think about war. You're erasing the women more.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm glad I don't normally agree with Barnaby Joyce, but I'm with him on this one.
Oh, absolutely. And also too, I read a little bit of the article, and when you use the word they, it confuses, because they is plural. So you think you're talking about one person, and then all of a sudden plural people word is put in there, so they doesn't make sense. It actually is plural, so it's grammatically completely incorrect. I mean, I feel like saying to people, if they call themselves they, oh, don't you know who you are? You know, do you have schizophrenia? Because that's what it is. It's like, I know that sounds harsh, but it's like, if you have to say I'm a they, then if you don't know who you are, then go and see someone, because you're one or the other.
Oh, you can't get an appointment, so.
Pardon?
Yeah, you can't get an appointment. Oh, it is. It's crazy.
No.
This is it, you know, all this stuff, particularly here in Australia, you know, there were so many kids came out after the COVID lockdowns, because they spent their whole time online. They haven't been able to access any mental health support, and they're all cuckoo. And it was like it was a perfect opportunity for this ideology to spread like wildfire. And people are online talking about it like it's been around forever, right? Even the dickheads at the Greens are saying, oh, you know, non-binary people and whatever have been around since before the Aboriginals, and all sorts of rubbish like that. And yet nobody was talking like this 5 years ago.
No.
10 years ago, even fewer. 20 years ago, even less. You know, it is a ideological belief and a social contagion.
Yes. And I've had a look at that with social contagions. I don't know whether it was in the 80s or the 90s, but I think it was in England. A journalist wrote a story about a young girl putting a toothbrush down her throat to throw up. Within weeks, they had an epidemic of young girls in England doing that, because they heard it, so it became a social contagion. And then the same thing happened in Hong Kong. A young woman died on the way home from school from anorexia, and it was reported in the news. And then all of a sudden, within a very short time, they had a mass problem with young women with anorexia nervosa. And that, you know, and there's even through history, there's been social contagions. I think in the 15th century, there was one of like a spontaneous dancing, and they physically couldn't stop. Yeah. And that was a social, like there's genuine social contagions that have been recorded throughout history. This is another one that's online. And I mean, I've heard a friend's daughter who's 11, and I spent a lot of time with this family over a 4-month period. And at the beginning of the time, and this was during COVID, the daughter never ever spoke about it. And then 4 months later, she was back at school, and all of a sudden she was saying she was non-binary. And this is an 11-year-old girl. While she was at home where there was no school, none of that language was being spoken. And then as soon as she went to school, and then I've got another friend who's raising her granddaughter, who's 6 years old, came home from school one day saying, oh, boys can have minis, meaning a vagina. That's her word for it. And I said to her, that's either on the playground or they're teaching it in the classroom. You need to get onto that if you don't want that sort of language, and you don't want your granddaughter being taken down this path of non-reality. It's frightening.
Wow.
Yeah, it is so frightening. And I don't have a large circle of friends. I've only got a small network, and just to see what's going on is just frightening. And how easily women are giving up their rights or thinking it's not that bad. So I've started posting on Facebook, and I'll do like a little paragraph and just ask a question and say little things and just leave it at that, and for people to think of, are you aware this is what's happening? Are you okay with a man coming into your change room and undressing in front of you? Fathers, are you okay with this for your daughters? And I even did one in New Zealand, and where I grew up. It's a tiny little small town of about 6,000 population. It was a very rough meatworks, swan dry factory town. And I actually said, hey, you know, grandparents, aunties, uncles, mothers, fathers, cousins, how do you all feel about, you know, the women, men being allowed to self-ID and play sport in New Zealand? Don't know about you guys, but I sure remember how the Waitara boys, teenage boys were and how big they were. And I just left it at that. And one person came after me and attacked me on the thread, and everyone else supported it. And we're like, whoa. And I'm like,
I used to post stuff too, and initially nobody would comment, and now because I know so many TERFs, everyone comments and you know, in support. But I've also noticed people who I was nervous about posting this stuff in front of because they were, you know, gay or trans themselves or whatever, and I used to hesitate and go, oh, I'm probably going to lose this friendship, but I'm going to post it anyway. Those people have contacted me and thanked me for sharing on this issue.
I've had a couple do that too.
Yeah, so you know, for my fears were unfounded, and any decent person can make the difference, can see the difference between propaganda and common sense, you know.
Well, that's what I've tried to do. Once I started, I was going blah and too much, like in a long post, and I thought, okay, get smarter, and merely post reality, like reality check, like Helen Joyce's book, Trans versus Reality, you know, the trans ideology versus reality. So I've been giving them reality. And fathers, think about this. Mothers, think about this. This is what's happening.
Yeah, Helen Joyce did an interview with the trigonometry podcasters on YouTube.
Yes, I've seen it a few
recommend
times.
that it is peak trans material for fence sitters and people unsure about what's going on and people don't quite understand. Helen has an amazing way of describing things in ways that everyone can understand. I highly recommend listening to Helen Joyce on trigonometry.
Well, she's an academic. Yeah, she's an academic that left the academic world, and then I can't remember where she worked. I can't remember, and she's left where she took a year sabbatical from where she was working. Pardon? The Economist, that's it. And now she's not going back, and she's made the decision to stay in the fight for women's sex-based rights. And she's been on.
She's actually a mathematician. Her academia was in mathematics.
Yes, and
which is a rational thing.
Yep. And
even you know, the hard stuff. Yeah.
Yep. And she, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, that's okay. She's been on Spiked or Trigonometry twice now. So that's her second time. I think she was about a year ago. And so that one's worth listening to as well, because that was early on. Because she had to sort of walk away from The Economist because of the way she was being treated.
Well, she in this interview, she talks about the impact that speaking out as a public TERF has on your life, and it does take a toll. You know, it does affect your employment. You know, it does. Your boss might not sack you, but one of his clients might refuse to use your business because you're a member of staff, you know, so it has these flow-on effects. And most of us who speak out publicly are self-employed or retired or we're not working for the public service or anything like that. And quite a few people have actually, and I've had to reinvent myself. I've had to go back to study because I had to withdraw from, well, I had to change tack because of my family situation. But you know, so I'm going to be, you know, I'm basically going to be self-employed, so I don't really have to worry. But, you know, there are a lot of women who are going back to study, who are going into a different field because they want to be able to speak freely, and they're being contained by the fear of financial insecurity. And so, and if we do that, if we can, you know, be self-employed or be employed by people where it doesn't matter what our political views are on this issue, go for it. I mean, if someone went, I've worked part-time, and if someone went to my boss and said, oh, we want to, you know, she's a TERF and I hate your business for it, she'd tell them where to stick it. So I don't doubt that for a second. So you've only been sort of around the TERF circle for a little while, haven't you?
Yes, I've only been Oh, it's only been a couple of months, but I started listening. Something came up on one of my Facebook, those Facebook, I don't know technical terms.
Your feed.
But yeah, Facebook feed. And it was basically about the gender ideology versus reality in American settings. And I thought, oh, what's going on here? And so I listened to it. And because I pressed like and listened to it, I then got more coming up, and then more came up and more came up. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? And then before I knew it, I started searching for the subject and trying to go, okay, I hear what's happening. I don't like it. I think it's terrible. And then slowly learning, where do I fit in? What are my views? And so I just kept listening until I found my voice and what I feel comfortable saying and what my true beliefs are as a woman. And I just have this fire in my soul that's just burning, and I have to follow it. I can't not follow it. And my husband has even said, I can't believe how passionate you are. And I just said to him, look, I've always known in my life that I would follow something or find something. I knew this from a young age, and I didn't know what it was. And I just left that thought alone. And this is what's present. And I didn't go out searching for a cause. It found me, and I can't stop. And because I'm self-employed, I don't have to worry. I completely understand that there are many women that can't speak up because you get cancelled and you lose your job, you lose your home, etc., etc. So I can be a woman that can scream from the rooftops, and I can't stop. And so what I'm doing now is I found other women, and I'm asking advice on how do I manage this, how do I learn, and the most important answer I've got is don't burn out. And when you see, and so it's a matter of learning what I need to do, what I can and can't do, and educating myself. And I had my first conversation with a full-on woke left person regarding this, and it was mind-blowing listening. I've heard of these people, I've seen them online, but it was my first time face-to-face, and it was whoa. And the more I spoke, the deeper they went, and as in the further they dug their heels in. And even though I could see what I was saying was biologically correct, they couldn't cope with it and kept saying no, no, no. And I'm like, and I kept coming from, and I said, no, biologically a man is a man. If they want to present as a woman, that's their right, but they don't belong in my space where it's a female-only space. We need our sex-based rights, and that hasn't magically changed, that we no longer need those. Just because men want to come in and tell us, they're demanding to come in, and they're bullying, and they're coming in, and around the world now, women are being raped and children are being raped because men want to come into female-only spaces on all levels. There is no more female-only spaces anymore if they get their own way throughout the world. And it's just like, are you kidding me? And I mean, like I said earlier, 127 years ago, we finally got the vote as women, but in Australia, the Aboriginal women didn't get the vote till 1962. So it wasn't all women. So really only from 1962 did all women of Australia get the right to vote. And now we've lost our own safe space where we can't just be ourselves. Even, it's just a minefield.
Yes, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, like I listened to Graham Lynham. He was the creator of Father Ted, and he got cancelled 3 years ago, and he stood up for this. And he even went on to the Her website, dating site, and the Her dating website is for lesbian women. And he went on there to prove a point that he could get on there, self-ID as a woman, and he was allowed to be on a lesbian dating site. And he didn't have to dress up as a woman. And if women complain, they get kicked off. But isn't being a lesbian same-sex attraction? That's what I thought. That's what everyone tells us. And that's what the women say. They are not attracted to biological men, but they're not allowed to have their own dating site. And I tried saying this to this left woke woman. She said, oh, well, they can just go on a normal website. And I said, so they have to filter through all. I said, are you kidding me? And in the end, everything I said was wrong. So I said, well, there's no point talking to you because you're not prepared to listen. Everything I say is wrong and everything you say is right. You know, and yet she didn't even know basic stuff about what's actually happening in the world. And it was so sad because she's a wonderful, intelligent woman, but totally captured.
It's like a religion. You can't speak to someone who's indoctrinated. They've got to come out of it. We're nearly out of time, actually. So let's pop on for half an hour and talk about the news and a bit of a chit chat. And look, once again,
I've just joined TikTok. So I've got my TikTok. I've just set up a TikTok app, but I'm going to start doing that eventually. But on Twitter, I've put my name up as Juanita 21st Century Suffragette. And I just started with that, and I've only got like followers that I like to follow, of course, and then retweeting. And I'm just starting to put my own little words up in little, you know, tiny little blocks and just learning how it all works. And, you know.
Let it's up and running, and I'll share some of your TikToks because I'm sure they'll be pretty good. It's really nice. See, I've never not been in this crazy.
Don't forget. Be the billboard.
Be the billboard. I've got my feminist t-shirt.
I never leave my house without a Be the Billboard t-shirt. Now I've made myself a rule. That's what I'm doing. Really? And I have had 2 women scoff at me. Everyone else has been nothing but positive, men and women. So, and I've even got a nighttime one, which is a white t-shirt with gold writing, so I can go out in the evening wear.
Excellent.
It's a bit over the top, but hey, what the hell? You only live once.
And the way I look at it, people bag out Kelly J for selling merch, right? But it's your choice to purchase it or not. And she doesn't demand you buy her merch to come and speak at her speaker's corner, does she? But as far as I'm concerned, for the amount of work she's put into this cause and for the way that she's trying to include all women, I don't care if she's driving a Jaguar with a fake fur coat and dripping in diamonds at the end of this. It would be really nice to see a woman get something positive out of this thankless job being a public turf. So, she lives a normal life she lives a regular life with her husband and her children, and this is her cause, and this is how I'm donating to a worthy cause of women's sex-based rights. What's more honourable than that? Yeah, and as Spider Red Dog pointed out last week, the suffragettes sold merch in order to get their ship fare back to the UK. So there you go. They sold merchandise.
And also they made one of the first political banners in Australia, and instead of it being at Parliament, it's only on display at Old Parliament. They don't have it on display in regular Parliament for us all to see. It's actually tucked away, and yet it's Australian history, but because it's female history, it's just pushed to the side.
Well, I'm going to go and see that when I go up to Canberra for the last talk on Kelly J's tour. I'm going to go up for that one as well. So I'm going to go and look for that. Thank you so much, Juanita. It's been fantastic to have you on. Because I am tired and jaded. I've been mouthing off about this since 2014, and I'm very tired. And I am so excited when I get around people who are sort of, so enthusiastic about this cause. And it reminds me, we have to keep going, because if we say, someone new's here, let's just duck out, that's where we'll be overrun. But if we all work together and the new people coming up take some of the heat off, you can do TikToks, which will free up other women to work in other areas and whatever. If we all work together and contribute and, and support each other, then we're going to win this. We're going to pull back.
Yeah, and everyone's got their strengths. And what I've found is, for me, is like, okay, where can I fit in and be a part of of the word and giving people information. And for me, that's what all I can do is give information. And hey, think about this. This is reality. This is reality. Our safety, dignity, and privacy has been stripped away so men can pretend to be women and say that they are. That's not okay under any circumstances. You want to say you're a woman, then go to a unisex toilet, but don't turn ours into one, because we need our own.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
and on
we
that
have
note,
to have our own space. Sorry.
Yes, we do. We do. Yes, we do. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, so on that note, we better go because we're out of time. But so much for joining me today. And
thank you for having me.
It's all right. And if people could like, subscribe and share, that would be really, really good. We're also dropping a Patreon this week that you can financially support this channel at, like, I think it's $5-10 a month at the most or something like that, which will help us do some direct action. And may eventually lead to me upgrading my tech in some way, because I'm on satellite internet. So I apologise for the choppy feed at the moment. My internet's been playing up, and internet permitting.
Get our own billboard. Our own billboard.
Yeah, well, nobody will have us. But yeah, so we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Juanita, and thank you, everybody. Catch you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.